a lot. Oops.
I don't speak any particularly well. I don't know if you've noticed or not, but I'm not the best public speaker, which is why I love um, performing music, I think, because it's something that someone more eloquent has already written down. But I speak English, mostly fluent in Spanish, and then next would be like French. I wouldn't say I'm fluent in French, but like I know a lot to get by in France. And then probably equal proficiency in Italian and German, like
It
enough
helps.
to ask for directions and order things off the menu, and of course all the musical directions that are in those languages, right? So a
Yes.
lot of Italian musical terms.
Hey, good morning, everyone. We already have Irene and Susan and Kathy with us, and others are checking in. Keith, good morning. We're having convos with Kim and Andrew this morning, and I'm so glad. We're just chatting about kids and language, and Elliot has his French AP test today, which has been very nerve-wracking. And
Musical terms.
yes, and so we're talking. Oh, there we go. Okay. And making sure I can see all of our chat. I got my windows up. So for those of you joining us from wherever you are, probably your living room at home, we're glad you could be a part of this conversation. Andrew, on Convos with Kim, we've been doing a lot of like breathing and talking about our nervous systems and how to kind of, deactivate all the tension and anxiety happening in the world. And so today we're gonna have a fun and more spontaneous conversation. But I did think that I would start, because I have Andrew with us, with Psalm 96, which says, "Oh, sing to the Lord a new song. Sing to the Lord all the earth. Sing to the Lord, bless his name. Tell of his salvation from day to day. Declare his glory among the nations, his marvelous works among all the peoples. For great is the Lord and greatly to be praised." So I know some of you are mentioning that you're checking in from work on your break and able to, oh, hi, Lori, who's checking in for a little bit. Also at work all the way up in Washington. We miss you, Lori. And it's so good to have all of you with us. Hey, Andrew, it's good to have you with us.
Hey,
Where are
how's it
you
going
today? Are you somewhere extravagant?
Well, it looks like I am in the Metropolitan Opera House at Lincoln Center in New York City. However, I am just propped up by a couple pillows in bed, which is where I have all of my Zoom meetings, but don't tell anyone else because I don't have a desk here at home. So the bedroom is a nice quiet place with good direct sunlight.
Yes, yes, it is. We're so glad to have you be a part of this conversation. And it's been really wonderful for me personally, to see your face and your music in different capacities in recent weeks. It was really lovely seeing the organ on Sunday, even though I botched the opening of that.
It was really fun to play the organ again. I hadn't played it for a while, and I knew a lot of people were missing the sound of the organ, so I went in and practiced, the hymn that I was going to record, and I got some new equipment, so I was happy with how that turned out, and I'm glad people enjoyed it. And it's on YouTube by itself if anyone missed the service, or if they want to hear it by itself.
And just wants that standalone piece, so take note of that. So Andrew, how are you? You're a dad and a music teacher and a music director. So how is shelter at home going? I know school is now, we would just love to hear about your life, distance learning for your kids, as well as distance learning for your students, and what these last couple of months have looked like?
Yeah, so distance learning with my kids, I think, was an easier transition than most because they're going to Julian Charter School. So they've already only been going to school before the shelter at home. They were going on Mondays and Wednesdays to school. And then Tuesdays and Thursdays were like optional days. And then Friday was a work at home day. So it's like partial homeschool. And this year they started using the Summit program, which is project-based learning. So the kids will have like maybe 4 or 5 little, mini projects with assessments and then culminating in a larger project. So kind of it's just been monitoring them and making sure that their projects are on time. I think they're like 2 of the only kids in school that were totally caught up. And they just had their final week of school last week. So they're actually done now.
Oh my goodness. Our
Yeah.
kids are on modified year round.
Mm.
So they're in school until the end of July.
Ooh, that's rough.
And it has been a journey.
Yeah.
Elliot has like transitioning to high school. He has some placement exams as
Yeah.
well as that AP test, and he's trying to do his normal school load. So he's self-sufficient, but it's Aval is needed one-on-one all day, every day. And there's so many websites and places to go for math and places to go for language and videos and physical education. And then the Seesaw and Clever
Yeah.
and all those websites that we're trying to keep straight. How is it for you as a teacher during this time? And especially in something like music, how it could, huge limitations in what, right, you can do with
Yeah.
without the instruments.
I mean, luckily, I guess I could say luckily, I am not an ensemble teacher this year. So for the first time in my career, I don't have a group that is expected to perform regularly throughout the year. What I do at the school I'm at now is I'm the general music teacher. And so what happens during the normal school year is I see every single class once a week, and every teacher brings their class in for an hour lesson, and then that gives that teacher an hour of prep time to get their next lessons ready, use the restroom, eat, something like that. So my lessons are typically just like 50-minute long music lessons, ranging anywhere from different composers to different cultures, music, learning about the instrument families, learning really basic notational skills like how to read music. We had a unit in January where each grade level learned an instrument. So the first and second graders learned how to play the bells. The third graders learned those annoying little recorders. The fourth graders learned ukulele, and the fifth graders learned guitar. So luckily, when this happened, I just said, okay, there's 10 more weeks of school. I need to develop 10 lessons that the students can kind of self-guide through. And then we have a weekly discussion once a week. So for my my kindergarten, first and second graders, I post a lesson on Seesaw, which is one of those programs that you said you were using with Avila. And, it's basically like, hey, what are the instruments of the orchestra? Can you name them? What are the families of the orchestra? And then watch Peter and the Wolf, the Disney version, and respond to it with a few questions. And then for the older grades, the questioning and the content is a little higher. But I've been getting about 50 kids a week joining the Zoom discussions, which isn't the entire school, and I want it to be more, but like you said, there's so many things, so many websites, and I'm just the music teacher, so I'm trying to get the classroom teachers, because they have all the parent emails. I'm trying to send them the content and say, hey, here's the music lesson for the week, please upload this for your students. So the students that are interested in it are doing it, and the ones that aren't, I guess I'll see them eventually.
Yeah. Yes. It's a lot. God bless the teachers, because you're still teaching, but you're having to use all these different formats and systems, and then have parents trying to navigate it. and there's compassion, I think, for families out there too, especially families that are where one or both parents, or in single parent households, or when kids are living with grandparents and they're all still working and they have other responsibilities. A lot of what is required online does need some assistance.
Yeah, for you and I, it's hard enough with just having our responsibilities, but I can't imagine for a parent that's still going out and working, um, and maybe, you know, access to the internet is harder for them, and, you know, the schools are still providing meals for a lot of students. A lot of
Yeah.
lower income families were relying on the free and reduced breakfast and lunch to feed their kids, and so they're still having to figure out how to go to different schools that are providing those meals. So it's really must be really tough. Must be even tougher for them.
Yes. Yes. And we have Linda and Judy checking in. It's so good to see all of you this morning. Feel free. Andrew and I are just chatting about life, and I have some musical questions for Andrew, but feel free to engage the conversation and ask Andrew your own questions. Andrew, I'm curious when your love for music started in life.
I can't remember the exact moment, but when I was really young, 3, 4 years old, my mom was going back to school. She had me, and hadn't gone to college, and then decided that she wanted to go to college and get her English degree and her teaching credential. So while she was in school and while I was too young for preschool, I would go out to my grandparents' ranch. They have a ranch out in Lakeside, in El Monte Valley, across from the park. And I would go there and, you know, help my grandpa feed the cows and go on nature walks and do all kinds of cool stuff. But they had an old piano. It was over 100 years old. It had been in the family since they were homesteaders back at the beginning of the 20th century. And I would watch the Disney Channel. You know, I'd watch the Mickey Mouse cartoons and the Mickey Mouse Club and Winnie the Pooh and all that. And then I would go into the next room and I would play the melodies on the piano from ear. And this was a ratty old piano. Like it looked like you needed a tetanus shot just by looking at it. It was that old. And most of the keys stuck and it was out of tune. And I think a few years ago I saw it outside the house because it had termites in it. But my grandma, she learned piano when she was young, and she thought that I should have my own piano. So she told my mom, she said, if I get Andrew a piano, will you get him piano lessons? And so that sort of trick of being able to hear the songs by ear eventually manifested itself into, you know, traditional lessons. And I think I started piano lessons. It was a while. It was not until the 8th grade that I started the piano lessons. But of course, I had the musical ear earlier than that. And so in 5th grade, I believe, I decided to join the band. You know, they come out there and try to get all the kids to join the band and everything. So I chose the trumpet as my first instrument. I went to the music store and, you know, I tried blowing in the flute and couldn't make a sound. And I tried the clarinet, and I thought having a piece of wood stuck in your mouth kind of gave me the heebie-jeebies, like licking a popsicle stick, you know. But the trumpet, I blew in it, made a loud, obnoxious sound, and I thought, that's the instrument for me. So I took the trumpet home, and then I think the first weekend I had the trumpet, I figured out how to play Reveille, which is the song that they used to wake up the troops.
Yeah.
And played it like at 6 a.m. My parents loved that.
I bet.
So yeah, so for me it was kind of a combination of hearing music by ear and getting that formal training through the school band and then eventually through piano lessons.
Wow. It started young. And that's encouraging that you took lessons later. What do you recommend from a musical teacher perspective for like parents who want, like us, who want their kids to have an instrument and they get very excited for a season and then they are like done and they will not, we've given the kids lessons at different points, but nothing has stuck. Will it, or do you just need to like force them through their total unwillingness to practice and all of that? What are your suggestions for?
I have a great book to recommend to anyone, whether they are a parent of a kid with musical abilities, or people who are themselves interested in it, or even any skill, athletic skill, musical skill. The book is called The Talent Code, and the author, basically his thesis statement is there's no such thing as talent. The only way that we get good at things, at a skill, is by deep practice, by repetition. And he actually goes into the science of it, and he says that there is a protein called myelin that that helps speed up our neural pathways. So anytime that I pick up my hand, or that I walk, or that I talk, I'm sending signals from my brain to my muscles to do those things, right? Every time you do that thing, repeating it, develops the myelin, which makes the efficiency between the brain and the activity that much more efficient. It's sort of like going from 3G to 5G, or from going to dial-up internet to fiber optic cable. And so by repeating activities, we build up this substance in our brain, which makes us by a 0.0001% of a second better. And that's why you and I don't have to think about things like breathing and walking, because we've done it so many times. The challenge, though, with something like music or tennis or swimming is the desire in the person to want to practice that much. And that's called ignition. And sometimes it's a mentor. Sometimes it's seeing, oh, Michael Jordan is so good at basketball. I want to be like Michael Jordan. Or Yo-Yo Ma is so good at the cello. I want to be like Yo-Yo Ma. Or I want to be the best at this that there is. And you really can't force that on a kid. They have to want that.
Yeah.
And my advice for, should we force them to do it, is no. It would be better for them not to play music than to associate it with a negative association, like being forced to practice or being forced to do it. Better that they are a patron of the arts and that they appreciate music than that they have a negative memory of being forced to do it. So
you've just removed a little bit of parental guilt. So thank you for that.
Yeah, but definitely check out that book, The Talent Code. It's a short book and it's really interesting, and it's not just about music.
Well, and that's so interesting what you say, because as a young child, you desired to mimic the songs. Not all kids would do that. So there's something imprinted on you and your personality and your desires that another kid could have done but not wanted to do. But they may have, been sketching the whole time, or they may have gone outside and hammered something and watched a parent hammer and just wanted to, work with building things in a different way. And it's fascinating.
Yeah. And there are some suggestions for, as a teacher, or maybe as a pastor, how can you as a leader create that ignition in other people and make them want to go out and do those things? And it's hard to do.
It's hard to
and
do.
And not everybody is going to want to. And I mean, think about it this way: if everyone was a great musician, if everyone was a great athlete, then no one would be great. No one, I mean, it wouldn't be special. And because we all have our own thing that we are good at, or that is special to us, that's what makes us unique.
Yeah, and whenever we can already tap into the desires and the gifts inborn in people. So yes, I hear what you're saying about that also being cultivated, that people have to practice, but they also have longings around what has led them on the path they are in life. Even as we come into a faith community, it's really helpful and important that we like maximize where people already want to serve and give, and fit them in places that are natural with, their abilities and talents that have been that have been crafted over the years. So even as we bring in new elders, I have the pastoral responsibility and honor of just choosing where people serve. And occasionally you need people to serve in an area where they really don't want to serve. But I really like to place people where their desires are, because some people really want to teach and be more involved in Christian education. Some people really want to oversee the technical and the aesthetic and the musical components of worship. Others really want to care for the stewardship of our property and our facilities and all. So even in like a faith family, as in with any family, organization, school, we're operating at higher levels if we can tap into what our desires and longings are, and how that meets the need of the people and the joy of God, along with where someone has, I keep saying has talents, but has cultivated those talents, right? Has worked on that. Yeah. I have a couple of questions coming in for you. From Susan, she asks about what are the various types of advanced degrees in music, and what are the requirements for the various types of advanced degrees?
Okay, so outside of the bachelor degree, I assume, because the bachelor in music is much broader. You can get it in music education. You can get, a liberal arts degree with an emphasis in music, which is sort of like a grab bag degree. You can get a degree in performance. Okay. You can get, there's an ethnomusicology degree, where it's the study of music in other cultures. There is a music theory degree. There is a music therapy, actually. I think Point Loma Nazarene might have a music therapy degree. What else? Music education, I think I mentioned that. And composing is its own degree as well. There's also recording degrees, where it's a music degree, but it's also learning about the technology to record music. And it's assumed that you have a musical background as well as a technological background. Once you get into the master's level, you can choose conducting, which is what I chose. And then once you choose conducting, you have to either go instrumental or vocal. I chose the choral conducting. If you want to obtain a master's in performance, it's kind of more of the same that you did with your bachelor's degree, just going more into depth about the physiology of the voice, learning more difficult repertoire. Most opera singers have at least a master's, if not a doctorate in performance. And then you can get a PhD or a DMA in music. And then you, like any doctoral program, you have to write a dissertation on a very narrow subject area that you learn a whole lot about. And hopefully your research contributes to research that'll help others. So if I was going to get my DMA in music, which, by the way, the closest place I could do that would be UCLA, I would take all the coursework, I would take theory work, I would probably conduct ensembles, and then I would have to choose a topic like clarinet reeds of the 1730s in southern France, or something like super, super specific like that. So yeah, that's pretty much it. And then of course you can keep pursuing music education as well, and do your own case studies for different educational theories as they relate to teaching music.
Thank you. That answers that.
Oh, and I forgot, you can also at Christian universities get a degree in like worship leading.
In its various forms?
You know,
Like hymnology is different than contemporary.
it's mostly, I think, mostly as it relates to contemporary worship, because most of the schools that offer it are like Biola, Azusa Pacific, Liberty, you know, schools like that. Well, long ago, when I was a senior in high school, I was toying with the idea of going to Azusa Pacific. I can't remember why I didn't ever apply, but I know that they had a contemporary worship program there.
Okay. We'll circle back to that. But Kathy asks, Andrew, who was your mentor when you were young? And do you have a mentor now? What a great question.
Who was my mentor when I was young? This is, I always have a hard time answering this question, because there was never a person that I modeled myself after or who took me in to mentor or to mentee, I guess. What I did growing up was I observed the leaders around me, and I sort of gleaned what to do and what not to do from all of them. So, you know, some leaders have a lot of content competency, but don't teach well, or just are kind of not nice people. Others are very dynamic leaders, but their pedagogy, their ability to teach the content, was confusing or disorganized. So, you know, my mentor is a conglomerate of all these different people, as well as, you know, performers. And I don't really have one person that I could say really shaped me. It was sort of like, you know, I want to do those things that band director did, and I like the things that choir director did, but I would never do it this way, or I wouldn't be this way with students. Yeah, so I don't really have one. And as far as now, I don't really have one now either. I'm kind of doing the same thing, you know, um, with my supervisors at work. I have, you know, different principals who come and go, different teachers who I see how they teach and their style, and I say, oh, I'm going to do things more like that, or I'm definitely never going to say those things to my students. So I know it's kind of a nebulous question to me. I can't really say that person changed my life.
Well, and what you're sharing, we don't need to get into the Enneagram, but it's consistent with personality, right?
Absolutely. My desire for knowledge in different areas has kind of made me not able to anchor to one type of person. And also, I naturally just don't really fit into a box or comply with any one certain aspect. I also, like right now, I'm doing the admin credential program through San Diego State. I started it last week, and I'm going to be continuing that for the next 3 semesters. So I'll be done next May, and I'll be able to be a vice principal or principal. But I've been reading presidential biographies, and right now I'm on Madison, so the 4th president. And again, I'm just like taking each one's leadership style and personality and gleaning what was good about them, you know, what was bad, how would I want to be as a leader, you know. And I'm not going to be the president of the United States, but I can still learn from their styles of leadership and how they carry themselves.
Yes.
And I always want to be better, you know.
Yeah. I see that in you, and I value that in you. You strive for excellence. And I love what you mentioned earlier about practice, because I think some people are really good at things and others assume, oh, it's just, they just had that in them, you know?
Yeah,
And
it's
it's like, no,
actually
they work really, really hard.
yeah, it's actually, this is a secret that I'll let you all in on. Performers are kind of insulted by people coming up to them and saying, you know, oh, you're so talented, because to us it feels like you've undermined, or you've brushed aside all the hours and hours and hours of practice that we put in to making that performance as good as it was. And it does not come easy to anyone, I don't think. There are aspects that do come easy. You know, your bone structure of your face can make your voice more resonant. You're born with the voice that you have. So, you know, if it's just particularly pleasing to the ear, like Pavarotti, then you could say you were born with it. But Pavarotti still had to work really hard to
That's right.
use what he was given naturally, um, to be at a high level. So if you ever want to compliment someone after performance, say, you know, I really appreciate all the work that you put into that performance. I can tell it showed.
That's great. That's a great thought. Um, so I'm curious about your journey with music and how it's maybe widened, how your appreciation has changed over the years, and how maybe even certain genres of music have grown on you that you didn't value at another time in your life. Can you speak to your own academic, but also just your personal journey with music?
Okay, yeah. Yes, my, you know, like you said, because of my personality, because my, you know, Enneagram, or whatever you want to call it, I just naturally gravitate to many, many, many different styles of music. Um, I grew up listening to, you know, the music, the popular and rock music of the 70s and 80s, because that's what my parents listened to. And so that's what I listened to. And I think most kids listen to the music that their parents listened to growing up. But the older I got, I continued to like it more than the music that was uh, currently coming out. So in the 90s, um, late 80s, early 90s, you know, with grunge rock and punk rock and yeah, hip hop becoming more popular, I kept listening to the music of the 70s and 80s. And I remember my first cassette tape was Simon and Garfunkel's greatest hits.
Oh, so
So
good.
so you can imagine I kind of self ostracized from my contemporaries,
I listened to
musically at
Simon and
least.
Garfunkel in high school.
Yeah, because they're listening to Green Day and I'm listening to Simon Garfunkel, right? Um, and so I developed an appreciation for deeper, more complex music. And I mean, look, everyone thinks that their music is great, and that the music nowadays is bad, right? Everyone looks back and says the music of their youth was the best. But I wasn't listening to the music of my youth in my youth. So now looking back on popular music with the lens of a theorist and a historian, um, I can say subjectively that I like it more, but I can also list all the objective reasons that that music was at a higher quality than nowadays, whether it be the recording techniques or the lyrical content or the complexity of the chords, the melodic lines, the vocal technique of the singers, you know, all of that stuff. Um, Definitely, you know, playing piano obviously got me into classical music. I didn't really listen to it before studying piano, but when I started studying piano, playing Mozart, Bach, Beethoven, I had a phase for like a year where I played nothing but ragtime music, right? So like
Love
the
it.
music from, The Sting, right? The Paul Newman movie. And I got really into Chopin. I only took piano lessons for 5 years. And at the end of those 5 years, I was playing a lot of pieces by Chopin, the Polish, French Romantic era composer. Yeah, and trying to think. In the 90s, my dad listened to country music a lot, so I sort of listened to country music too. I'm not ashamed to say. Garth Brooks, George Strait, Randy Travis, those guys there was sort of a renaissance of country music there in the early 90s for a while before it turned into, songs about beer and partying down by the river.
That's right.
I trying to think what else, big band music. I've always loved Frank Sinatra. I've always loved. I started getting into opera when I was in college because I took the opera class. I was in an opera. It was an American opera by Aaron Copland called The Tenderland, and I played the mailman. So I got into opera as I started learning about opera. I think it's really hard to fully appreciate opera without really knowing a lot about it. And I think that's why people who don't like it don't like it. I learned by taking music history classes about hip hop and sort of the natural progression. If you study American music history, there's a pattern of African American musicians creating a style, that style becoming popular, and then the white musicians sort of taking that music and introducing it to a white audience, which then makes it part of the cultural zeitgeist. And usually the Black musicians don't get credit for that music coming from their culture. But I think nowadays we're doing a better job, making sure that students understand, spirituals, where they came from, which led to the blues, which led to jazz, which led to rock and roll, which led to funk and soul, which eventually led to hip hop and rap. I don't listen to hip hop and rap though. I'll be honest. For me, it doesn't do anything for me. And I think that's okay. When people ask me why I don't listen to it, I usually say, I believe it was not intended for me to listen to. And that's okay. And I don't relate to it, and that's okay. And I still appreciate it for what it is.
Yeah, I sometimes have to listen to hip hop. And I have like, I get in moods. And I'm like, I definitely have Beyonce moods, and I've been having some Lizzo moods. So I listen to a wide range, but then when I exercise, I can't listen to anything hard. Like some people want to listen to like heavy metal and stuff, and I can't. But hip hop is pretty good with me in exercise. I get going with hip hop. Beyonce's not hip hop, but what genre is Beyonce?
Well, depending on the song or the album, she's anything from pop to hip hop. I would say pop hip hop crossover.
Yeah.
I'm not a huge Beyonce fan. I think she has a great voice, but that style of music, it doesn't touch me the way others do.
What
okay.
music is most meaningful for you?
In what way? Like, what do you mean by meaningful?
My first question is, can you listen to music without a critical ear? In every genre. I remember a seminary professor of mine who was working on Bible translation around the clock. And I asked him, do you actually read the Bible for your own nourishment? And he said, kind of. He's like, when I have spiritual practices, I pray, I go on walks, I sing. I have to like even experience God in these other ways, because when I'm reading scripture, I'm thinking about like the original Hebrew meaning and the Greek translation and what the context was and all of those pieces. And it's hard. He was just admitting it's hard for me to turn my brain off. So in a different way, I wonder with you, are you able to do you just pick up, because you're wired that way, do you just pick up on things all the time, or can you kind of disappear and let music be what music is? So that, and then what is really meaningful to you? And I'm sure that changes depending on whether you're being spiritually nourished by music or whether you're, gutting a closet and listening to whatever you feel like listening to on Spotify. But
Yeah.
so the critical ear question.
Yeah, the critical ear question is a blessing and a curse. Once you learn about music in an in-depth way, you don't see it the same way. It's sort of like if you study science and you look at what cells look like under a microscope, it changes fundamentally the way you see how a human body is structured. Once I'm sure you learn about how the Bible was put together and how it was translated and who the different authors were or who we think they might have been.
Right.
You read passages differently. You read it from the perspective of knowing about that person who wrote it and when they lived and what influences they had. And you have to consciously make an effort to separate your critical analysis from your enjoyment of it, right? So most of the time, I am a snob about music. Like my siblings, I've tried to explain things about it before to them about music, like, hey, let me explain what's going on. And they're like, no, I don't want to know, because I don't want you to ruin this for me. I know this song is simple. I know it's dumb. I know the music that I like is just really dumb. I don't want you to ruin it for me by explaining to me how dumb it is. Just let me enjoy this guilty pleasure. And I think I do have some guilty pleasures, like artists or groups or songs that I'll listen to that I'm like, I know this is kind of dumb, but it's fun, right? But I can't even think of any right now at the top of my head. Most of the music I listen to, I need it to be cerebral, and I need it to be stimulating in a way that makes me appreciate the complexity of it. And sometimes something simple can be beautiful, but for me and for my personality, my brain, I appreciate the beauty of complexity more than the beauty of simplicity. But here's the interesting thing is I appreciate silence as much as music. So some of the most profound moments of my life have been not listening to music, but having it be silent or having just the sound of nature. I don't like to go around, nowadays you see people, they have their earphones in while they walk around town. And they always want to be listening to their music. They want to have access to it. And I think it's great that we have the technology. Like, who would have thought that we have this device that has thousands and thousands and thousands of songs at our fingertips that we could listen to on a plane, on a bus, in the car, on a trail. Like, that's incredible. But at the same time, I think it infringes on those special moments where silence is more important than having a soundtrack to your life constantly going,
Yes. Well, and there's a different kind of music in nature. And that always kills me when one of my kids wants to we're like by the ocean or we're in the middle of nowhere in a forest and they want to listen to music. I'm like,
Yeah.
You will not listen to anything right now.
Well, is the music, and for kids, it's probably an entertainment thing, and maybe for a lot of adults too. The studies have shown that like our attention spans have dramatically decreased with the advent of the internet.
Yeah.
There's a book called The Shallows: What the Internet Has Done to Our Brains, and the book doesn't try to condemn the internet, but what it does say is that there's without a doubt the internet has made our ability to focus on one book to read for an hour without picking up your phone to look at what time it is or if you got an email, or to read an article even online that like I've been guilty of this too, where oh, that looks interesting, scroll, yeah, okay, this article's like longer than 2 scrolls, I'll come back to it. You know what I mean? Or a movie that doesn't have a lot of quick edits and it's just 2 people having a conversation, or an opera. That's why most people don't like opera or the symphony, because they're used to songs on the radio that are 2.5 minutes long. Our brains have been trained to take way more information, and the book is called The Shallows because it's like it's a mile long but an inch deep.
Yeah. I do love the opera, and I don't have your knowledge at all about opera, but I started listening to opera in college. And then when Jeremy and I, before we got married, one of his first like Valentine gifts to me were opera tickets, and we could only afford like the worst seats in the very corner at the very top. But we went to the opera at least once a year for like the first 5 years we were married. And then kid number 2 came along, and then couldn't afford tickets. But we talk about that. We're like, someday we're going to go to the opera again.
Yeah. Well, right now the Metropolitan Opera is broadcasting a free opera every night. They've been doing it for the last 2 months. If you go onto their website, metopera.org, every night it's a new opera, and it's available from like 3:30 p.m. till 3:30 the next day. So it's for 24 hours, and then they change it to another one.
Oh my goodness.
And it has subtitles, and it has interviews with the actors. Like after they leave stage, they interview them. Yeah, it's really cool.
Okay, I'm going to check that out. So I have another question, and then there's another question that's come in for you. Are there, we're in this alternative time, and I think a whole side conversation is that we all just wanted to go back to normal, and yet we're also aware that it won't go back to normal, that the world was already changing at a rapid pace, and now things will change more. And we're not totally certain how that looks. So in this segment, we've often been doing like a breathing or a prayer practice. And I'm wondering if you have any suggestions for our hearers about a spiritual practice involving music for them, how music can be used in that way, especially in a time when we're not singing together in church and all that. Do you have any spiritual practices you would encourage with music?
Sure. A lot of it will come down to taste, right?
Yeah.
But I think discovering new types of worship music could be helpful and edifying as well. Chant is a great one. You don't have to do it, but you can listen to it. There's lots of chant online. My last hymn time talked about chant, and I put a link to like one chant on there, but you could go on YouTube, or if you have Apple Music or Spotify, you can pick an album of chant. And I mean, the nice thing about it is it's just, you can listen to it passively. You can do breathing to it. You can have it on late at night, early in the morning, whenever. And I think there's a reason that the chant was done by the monks. It
And
was a
still
form of,
is.
and it still is true. It was a form of worship, but it was also a form of meditation
Yeah.
and relaxation. And I think the simplicity of just a long flowing melody line, it does what the monks were trying to do with their entire life, which was to block out all the external stimuli of the world and live simply, sing simply, and focus on spiritual things.
I love listening to Gregorian chant or what, they're beautiful, beautiful albums available on Spotify and Pandora and all of that. But so last week, for those that were with us, Heather Roos led a couple of practices and she did a brief chant for us to join in with. And I've also really valued, and Heather sounds fine, but she's a spiritual director. She's not a singer. And that was very encouraging and inviting to me when I started doing chant in a prayer circle that I'm a part of, because it wasn't like trained vocalists. It was very accessible. It was not intimidating to join in, and it would just be these simple lines, and it like calmed my heart and all of my thoughts. In a different way. I mean, there's like a physiology about it that you mentioned in your hymn time, that is so good for our like physical health, but it helps with our breathing and our focus, and it is its own form of meditation. So that's kind of an alternative. We have some people who practice centering prayer and silent meditation, but I think chant is a different way to connect. That's
Now,
powerful.
yeah, absolutely. Now, I personally don't listen to chant that much, but what I do listen to is Renaissance music. Um, the Renaissance era came immediately after the medieval era, and mid to late Renaissance is really what I dig. Um, Composers like Palestrina, composers like Victoria, who is a Spanish priest. He actually wrote exclusively sacred music his entire career. You know what I could do after this is I could develop like a playlist of like greatest hits for spiritual meditation, and because right now off the top of my head I'm kind of on the spot trying to think of them.
And then
You
we can put
know,
that in the comment section.
absolutely,
And
yeah,
so look for that later, and that will be a part of this video. That's great.
yeah. But these pieces that they wrote, the music is really intricate, but the intricacy of the music does not distract you from meditating. And you got to remember, this music was being written in the period when Gothic architecture was at its height, in the 13th and 14th centuries. So this music was designed to be heard in these cathedrals. And the idea was that the interplay and the interweaving of the parts were supposed to simulate the sound of angels singing in heaven. And so just beautiful, beautiful music. And you just kind of get lost in the tapestry of the interweaving parts. Now, further down the road in the Baroque and classical eras, you have sacred music that sounds a lot more formal, and it sounds a lot more presentational, if you will, rather than reflective, but it's no less beautiful. Listening to masses that were written by some of the most famous composers, Bach, Beethoven, Mozart, Haydn, Brahms, they all wrote masses that are just amazing. And you don't have to be Catholic to enjoy musical masses, because a mass in music is just the five parts of the ordinary: the Kyrie, the Gloria, the Credo, the Agnus Dei, the Sanctus. And really, those parts are built into our liturgy as well. Our Protestant Presbyterian liturgy, we call them different things, and we don't just recite the words in Latin. We say different things each week, but the musical offerings of a mass, I think, transcend denomination and are just some of the most beautiful music. And a lot of those composers were quite religious. Most of them were, I shouldn't say religious, they were spiritual, right?
Yeah.
And they made their bread and butter from writing music for the church, but they also profoundly believed the what they were writing.
Thank you for that. A question came in from Keith, who wants to know what have you and the elders considered for the choir and worship team when we are able to gather in the church again? This is a conversation that we're starting. And just for those of you who are part of our faith family, there are even documents circulating of 25 and 50 questions that must be asked before you reopen your church. There is a lot to consider. And churches have different perspectives on this. But especially for a congregation like ours with a lot of people in a vulnerable age group, we are working on every detail to make sure that that we're safe and that we can protect people adequately. And so we're looking into everything from cleaning pews and all surfaces to creating systems of receiving the offering and passing the piece that don't involve touch, don't involve communion as well, that don't involve any passing or sharing of germs. What we know right now from scientists and biologists who have done the studies is that, COVID is most easily passed in enclosed spaces. And which is why there have been actual studies done of how rapidly COVID spread in a couple of those choirs, Andrew, I'm sure that you've seen. So unfortunately, and I don't know if you want to speak to like the studies that were done around the deepened breathing, even though they were in quite a large space, it has been in close and intimate context with a lot of sharing of breath and tears, like funerals and choirs where it has been rapid fire spreading. So things are going to be different for a little while, and we don't have every detail planned out. But we're going to, even when we come back together, there will be extreme distancing. So Andrew, do you have any thoughts or specifics on that?
Yeah, it's really tough, right? Because today is Thursday, and every Thursday for the past few months, I've just felt like something is missing, because it's always Thursday night rehearsal, and getting to see all the wonderful people in the church choir. But unfortunately, with this disease, the setting of a choir, the act of singing in an enclosed space, and our choir being one of the most vulnerable groups of people during this disease. So combining a vulnerable group of people with a practice that has been proven scientifically to spread it, it would just be heartbreaking to come back early and risk that until we have more information about it. So I imagine, it is a bit of wait and see, but we are also working really hard to answer all those questions and to do what we can to bring as much normalcy back to the entire service, music, communion, all that as we can. I imagine, it's easier for a worship team of 4 or 5 people. I imagine that would probably be something we would see first, whenever that is, I don't know, but I imagine we'd see that first before a choir. And when testing is reliable and available for everyone, and I don't just think with the church choir, I think with businesses, with a lot of things, it's going to be having people tested, you don't have it, and then you are safe to be within an enclosed area with other people who have tested false. So yeah, unfortunately, it's really tough. I sing in a professional choir, and we had to cancel all of our concerts for the rest of the season. And it's, we're trying to have backers that will continue supporting us so that when we are ready to perform again, we have the money to pay the performers. My friend who sings opera out in Boston, she had 3 contracts that, had to be let go. And they're saying they might not have opera in Boston for another 2 years, and that's her source of income. Yeah. So we want to do what is safe, and no one wants the choir back together as much as I do, because I miss all of you.
And I think, I think it is important to remember, it's important to remember that we're still the church and we can still worship. I think some have felt like, when will we be able to be the church again? I've actually heard that question, and not even necessarily from our community, but from some of like the political debates happening. And I'm like, whoa, we are the church, and church and service and love and justice and music can all still happen. And we can hold that with the tremendous grief and loss of this time. It is not the same as being physically present together, and we're longing for that. And we're longing to do that in a way that is wise and inclusive for all. There are some that can get together with less risk than others. And so a whole other side of this, I'd say, for Keith and anyone listening in, is curious about this subject, is that we're also just speaking more and more about our technological needs, because the likelihood is that as restrictions lift, we will be back together, but it will not go back to what it was 3 or 4 months ago. Many have already been told by their doctors, until there is a vaccination, you're not to be out and about at all. And we have people in that demographic. So we have also been brainstorming, okay, how do we do this very homemade thing that's been happening on Sunday mornings, and step that up in the sanctuary so that there's a live feed, so that we may have some with us, but we will have others that maybe for the next 6 months will need to stay home. How can they still be a part of this faith community at the same time, seeing everything that is happening live? And so we're talking about how to get that level of Wi-Fi and a better camera and better audio in the sanctuary, with the hopes then the next phase after that is to just film better and then upload it. Andrew and I have talked about that. Sound and visual just gets exponentially better when you have better equipment, and when you can fine tune it after and edit things and take out loud noises. And so at some point we may just be uploading videos of the service at a later time on Sunday. But the initial phase is we are hoping to go live. And that's what we're working on. And we've had a couple of our elders here this week with camera loans, and trying to see what we can do to spruce up the sanctuary for that very purpose. So we're doing our research on that to at least plug people in. I imagine, Andrew, that we'll be hearing some special pieces from you as you, carry hymns and special song selections. And then I imagine that, a couple of songs with smaller groups will, of course, be integrated back in as we can, right?
Yeah, we're just looking for different creative ways that we can bring worship to you all, and also being smart about our purchases, because there are things that we can purchase right now that'll make what we're doing now better, but there are also other things that we could purchase that will make what we're doing now better and we'll be able to use after this is over. to improve the overall quality of our service, whether it be live or online.
Yes.
And we're all learning. Kim has invested countless hours figuring out how to stream these Zoom meetings and teaching elders and deacons how to use the same technology. And I've been learning how to edit movies together and, making the quality of the recordings better and just working on quality. And we're going to keep continuing to work on that. So those are investments that are short and long-term investments for our church.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Andrew. Andrew, you have, been just attentive to the needs of our community since week one. Andrew and I talked and I said, what if you just like sing a song that people can join in on? And he came back with the hymn times, these wonderful, educational, spiritually uplifting videos that also unpack our rich hymn history, and they've just been a gift. Andrew has recorded here in different ways. One Sunday recently, now I'm trying to Zoom as I manage the different boxes up on my computer screen for church. I'm trying to experiment a little bit with more voices and liturgists. Andrew was able to offer music a couple of weeks ago and then share his organ piece, and we're going to continue to do that for right now. But Andrew, thank you for the gift you are to this community, to this faith family. I know that you miss the choir and you miss the band, and we're so grateful to be able to hear your voice and see your face. If you haven't heard those hymn times, they're really wonderful, and they're just like 10 to 12 minutes. So they're these wonderful videos that I've enjoyed so much. And thank you for your knowledge and your wisdom, and for sharing with us from your life, as well as some of your expertise. I've learned things in this conversation.
Yeah, thanks for having me, and thank you everyone for watching this and for participating in the Sunday morning worship and watching the videos that I'm making. It's nice when I put the time in to see that people are watching, and please continue to send me suggestions for making them better or things that you want to hear about.
Yeah. Do you want to remind them of your email one more time? I know you've been doing that with all the hymn times.
Yes. My email for the church is music@firstpress-elcajon.org. It seems like a lot of people have comments on music, and they email Kim, and sometimes they email Joel. But the best way to get me directly is to use that email address. And this Sunday, there's going to be another hymn at the end of the service. I guess at the end of the service, maybe in the middle, probably the end. And then there will be a hymn time that will talk about last week's hymn and this week's hymn together, because they actually have a common theme.
I can't wait. I hope you guys are excited. And may God's grace and peace be with all of you on this Thursday. And we'll see you in just a few days for live worship from my living room and with a special feature from Andrew. Thank you so much, Andrew. And thank you everyone else too. God bless you.